So we're again, aren't we? Um, Back. The Flâneurs are back. It's been a hell of a week, but it's nice to see you all. So what we were talking, we do talk other than this, don't we? So we have been chatting on WhatsApp and this, that, and the other, and we've been saying about we want to play around with how we get going on the conversation. Sanjiri, you had a an idea that it was it if the person with the topic starts, we end up just moving into full-blown conversation. So we've said what we'll do is the two people who haven't brought the topic will try and introduce it, even though it's not their topic. And so
Right.
Dan's brought the topic, and we were just chatting about it. And so my interpretation of can I say the title?
Go ahead.
Because I loved this guy's
Yeah,
gone
I guess. Yeah.
nuclear.
This guy's
And
nuclear.
this guy's nuclear, yeah. And so it was about conversations in interviews, wasn't it? And I think, oh, Dan's what? So Dan's gone. He's disappeared. Oh, he's back again. Um, for those listening in,
I didn't want to,
Dan just
wipe.
disappeared
I
on
didn't want to
screen.
wipe my nose on camera. So.
Oh, fair play. Um, so So it's this experience, and a lot of people will be having this experience at the moment because we have been saying about the marketplace is volatile at the moment and people are out of work. We don't really want to feed that conversation and go over old ground. But um, how we find and how we behave in interviews is really interesting. So I won't say why this guy's gone nuclear because I'm sure Dan will say it, um, but I think that's a really good conversation to have. Sanjeev, you do your this is what Dan wants us to talk about thing.
No, I mean, I think it's a very relevant conversation, irrespective of, I mean, it's, it's always a valuable conversation because I think there's a lot of angst around, that interview process, which is either a series of, or maybe just a one-shot conversation. But there's oftentimes a lot riding on that. And, the alignment of needs, expectations, perceptions, fit, um, often ride on, a singular moment, a series of,
Yeah.
um, and I've been, I think all three of us have been, I'll let Dan speak for himself, but we've all been part of those conversations where you're not quite sure where it's going, but you have a feeling that, there's a misalignment of perception and you learn to take it on the chin and let it go where it may. And, and, um, but yeah, the interesting part for me is always, I used to put a lot of pressure, especially moving from the States and moving to Europe and having to, adapt to a French speaking culture. And oftentimes I think in English. And so that was very challenging for me to not give the impression of not being concrete, because that's a really cultural thing in France where it's like, soit
Yeah.
concret, be concrete, go straight to the point. But at the same
Right.
time, we're
Yeah.
talking out of a topic where, I still need to give a sort of layer of who I am and why I'm here, what my background is, what my motivation is. And that sometimes has served me wrong. And, so I've learned to just accept that. So that's, yeah, I think, what about you, Dan?
Yeah, I've been in a spot where, um, we spend a lot of time helping other people do and coaching and doing side by side. And so I've been looking at things to go be the doer. In some role at some company, there are some that I would like more than others. And I've been in these conversations, and which means getting back into the interview circuit. And in getting back into the interview circuit, it's really interesting to me because, I always used to like people. I used to do really well at interviews when I was interviewing for full-time employment. And that's because I came ready for questions like, hey, what's something that you messed up in the past? And I would have some really good story. And the thing that I messed up would be really small. And it would be like, sort of like surface level. So I can check the box of like, right. And all the skeletons I keep in the closet and I don't talk about them because like God forbid you talk about those things. And you know, as I've talked to more and more people, like I've talked on the show about how, you know, look, I've had my issues in the past, and I don't think that they were things that I was doing consciously. And I've fixed those. Now, not entirely. There are times the old Dan comes out, but I think that I have fixed those, and I think I would do much better in a corporate environment having addressed those things. And so in those conversations I have with other people, I run into so many people who are like, oh yeah, I had the same thing and I had to do like, and so I'm like, this more people need to talk about it. We need to make this normal, that this is a thing and people can get over it. And so I've been in these conversations and I'll say like, oh yeah, like I used to like, here's an example of something I did that I'm super embarrassed about, and I wish it never happened. And I've addressed it, and here's what I would do now. Like this is what I would do differently. And here's what I would do differently as a leader, and here's how it impacted this person. And I feel sick to my stomach about it every day. And I'll talk about that, and I'm very proud about it. And I'm not talking about it in a way of like I'm this evil human. I'm like, I was a person that made a mistake and I've learned from it. But what I'm finding is that it makes people really uncomfortable, especially that like, I don't think they actually want the answer to what's something that you learned from. And like, how have you, like, they don't want a real answer. They
Mm.
They
want
don't
a
want the big ones.
practiced,
They don't want
not
the
the
big
big ones.
shifts, the big learnings. Yeah, yeah.
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 The nuclear.
And that's when
Yeah.
you were saying, like, if they
Yeah.
hear
Well,
that,
when we
they
were
go, maybe
talking
it's this
earlier,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This
They hear it
guy.
and they're like, "Oh, this guy's nuclear. Don't want this guy because this guy, you know, once had an employee that he didn't, you know, over the course of a year didn't give good feedback to, and then gave a low rating to. Like, yes, I did that, and it was really bad, and I feel sick about it because of what that did to that person. And I wish I hadn't done it. I still believe the message of the low rating was correctly, but I should have been more forthcoming of like, you can't come into every one-on-one with me and you know talk crap about your spend the entire time talking crap about your coworker. Like that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Like but I should have addressed it more head on.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Well,
just,
so that is your learning. And so what you're saying though is like, so if you share that and share that you learn from it and you're a better manager, you're a better colleague,
Yeah.
what are you like, all they're gonna hear is this guy wantonly scored someone like it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird, isn't it? It's weird.
it's,
Like, why is that nuclear? I'm sure 90% of all managers have done things like that.
just not
Yeah.
even just managers, people.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In every sort of aspect of
Yeah.
their lives.
I had an image of Jack Nicholson. You guys remember when with Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson? I can't remember the name of the movie.
Oh, you can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
You good men.
A
Yeah.
Few Good Men, classic. I love
Yeah.
that scene. So that's
Yeah. Jack
but
Nicholson goes nuclear.
Randomly, I just read an article about Jack Nicholson. Did you know that his what he thought was his sister is actually his mom?
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I might have known that.
Yeah.
Because yeah, yeah.
wait,
She was
wait, wait.
16 and went
His
off to New
grandma
York
brought him up.
City. Yeah, to go be actor, dancer, something in New York City. She went to go, you know, New York City to make it big in life, and ended up getting pregnant. And this was a time when that was something that we didn't talk about. And so she had the baby, and the parents were like, "Oh, look, we have another child." So his sister was actually his mother, and his mother and his grandmother, who he thought was his mother, they both died before they could have a conversation about like, well, who is so he doesn't actually know who his biological father is. He doesn't know.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there you
Okay.
go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's all sorts of there's 6 million stories in the city, apparently, isn't there? So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's one of them. Interviews.
Yeah.
They are a mad, contrived situation, aren't they? They're just that, like Sanjira, you were saying that, like. So I was gonna say, like, you mentioned it, like it can be a one or two hit thing, and you've got to really impress. The other part of that though that then I'm feel like I'm drawn to also mention is like what I've had some, have you had some that were like 6 or 7 interactions, meetings, interviews for a role, and you get into the end of it and you're thinking like, good grief, how many more conversations before a
Yeah.
decision is made? I had one. This is one that always sticks in my mind. I had one that were so I'd sort of been, and I didn't mind it that much. I was in the sort of like in the mix of doing lots of interviews for lots of things. This was probably about 20 years ago, I'm not even sure. Um, but so I had an interview with an agency, then I had an interview with a recruiting manager. Then I had an interview with the recruiting manager and a HR person, and I think one senior person on the team. And this was to team lead sort of like an operations team. Um, and then I think it somehow that's was that 3 or was that 4? It somehow transpired that I had to have another with the same set of people. Then, then, and this was funny. So the team looked after sort of databases for some sort of training material. It was accountancy training stuff. And they kept going on, and I'd looked after a team of people who'd done similar for that for like a fast moving consumer good website. But I'm not like a technician in that way. Um, so they had me do like an online SQL test, and I was like,
Yeah.
you probably don't want me. I'm not going to score highly at the online test. That's not what I do.
Hmm.
Oh, do it. Oh, just do it. You just do it. You'll be fine. But what will it test? It would be just dumb luck if I scored highly. So they're like, anyway, no, just do it. You'll be. So I was like, all right, whatever. So I did do it. I didn't have anything else to do, so I did do it. And I just sort of like found out like it gave you enough time for me just to Google every question. I just Googled every question, put the answer in, Google every question. Oh, you've done brilliantly. Well, not really. I've just Googled every question. I just said, I've Googled every question. I don't know any of that stuff. Nah, brilliant. You'll be right. You'll be fine. So I was like, okay, this is weird. You're weird. And then, maybe another couple of interviews. I don't know. It's anyway, like the 6th interview
Oh
was
my
with the
God.
managing director, the head of whatever, the line manager, the head of whatever department I'd be in, and the managing director. Um, oh, this managing director was a proper dick. Um,
Yeah.
it was basically every single question was like a Myers-Briggs test.
Yeah.
In this situation, what would you do? In this situation, like weird situations. In this situation, would you? No, it wasn't. What would you do? It was, would you do this, or would you be more inclined to do this? I
Yeah.
was like, those are my only 2 options. I wouldn't do either of them. I'd be a grown up. I don't know, but it was weird. And I said to him at the end, I said, that's pretty much a Myers-Briggs test, isn't it?
Hmm.
It was like, well, what's wrong with that? I'm like, well, one, I don't believe in Myers-Briggs tests. And 2, are you mental? It was bizarre. It was bizarre. And he went, well, you're not getting the job. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want it. You were obviously all crazy and just got up and walked out. It was bizarre. And I
Yeah.
think, so, and this was a while ago, and that seemed like an oddity.
No, it's still going
But
on.
well, this is the thing. I think in this day and age now, it feels like I'm hearing more instances of those types of things, people having to go through those types of things
Hmm.
and being put through the real ringer because the market is so competitive at the moment.
Yeah.
It really being put through the ringer for jobs that are probably rubbish. That
Yeah.
and they would, if they got through those 6 things, they would probably have to, because of the situation, say yes, even though they probably know these 6 interviews have really shown me who you are.
Exactly. I mean, that's my point is like oftentimes it's obviously it's tough to the equation of am I willing to take one on the chin to go to this place because I'm looking for a job, and basically how needy you are of this job or this opportunity, and so how much you're going to put into it to circumvent, your answer or your values or, how
Yeah.
you present and how you come across to just get this job and whatever. Um, that's tough, but I've learned to, obviously that takes time and maturity and a bunch of other things, but the sort of attention to how the interview is ran for me is very indicative of how that place is ran. The values of that place, the
Yeah.
care with which they welcome you and offer context about themselves, or whether they're just drilling you, with questions and, do they really want to know about who you are as a person, and so um, my best experiences have been about people asking about my background and why I moved around so much, and
Yeah.
questions about relatability, because then at the end of
Yeah.
the day, whatever process thing you're doing, you do have to have some level of skill, but that, topic on who you are and how your soft skills, you know, sort of mesh with our collective way of doing things. I think that's kind of what you want to look for. And oftentimes the filter that's put on by the interviewer, the sort of partner or HR, you know, consultant who's helping
Yeah.
search for the talent, whatever the talent recruiter. Um, they just, go online, copy these little template tests or whatever, or some fancy, LinkedIn post that they saw from whoever, and they just run down those questions, which may or may not be correlated with, what it is that you do and the best play, the best way to approach you. And so
Mm.
it's it's becoming, I feel like it's becoming a lost skill, and maybe that's just my generic, you know, halo view and in France,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's yeah, I find less and less authenticity because you've got to be willing to give some of yourself. And you can't run an interview in 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like that's ludicrous. And so,
No, it's a big
um,
decision to make on
yeah,
knowing some on a CV and knowing having a
yeah,
conversation in it for
yeah,
30 minutes.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I think it's partly different culturally. Like in the UK, you damn near own the person once you hire them. It's not as much true in the US. Um, and but what I was going to say is that I find that what's interesting to me is that interviewing is almost like a skill in its own right, and people want
mhm,
these people who come off as super polished and um, have the quote unquote right answer. And I think one thing that has come out of the interviewing for me is I think I'm actually going to articulate this as I say it here to the next hiring manager I talk to, which is like, look, I know the one thing I am certain about in life, there's probably a couple, but this one I am certain of, the person you hire is not going to be perfect and is going to make
Yeah.
mistakes. So my question to you is, do you want the person who, when they make a mistake, is going to be honest about it and work with you to fix it? Or do you want the person who's going to put a cover story around it to make themselves look amazing? So because I'm not the second type, and that's what you're getting in this interview. If you want the type who's going to come in here and give you a papered over version of how perfect they are, think about that, how that translates into what they're going to do when they're working with you. And is that the kind of person you want to work with?
Yeah.
And maybe it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
maybe they do want they want the person with the skill to paper over mistakes and go to senior leadership and be like, we were perfect, because then they get a big bonus and they get promoted. Maybe that's what they want. I just don't think that's the right way to show up, because I
well,
think it's putting on a layer of armor that we don't need in the workplace. Like if we all were a little more, had a little more humility and owned up to mistakes and said, hey, we don't have all the answers and we do make mistakes, and how do we, how we get through them is what's important, more so than getting through them perfectly. I think that would be a long way to making offices better.
yeah, but that's when you get labeled nuclear. If you bring that, if you articulate what you just articulated in that interview process, you know, I'm sure there's tons of, not tons, but I'm sure there's been stories of people who say, I hired this guy because he actually showed me vulnerability and was actually really authentic with his answer and showed that he didn't care and whatever, whatever. But more times than not, it's you're caught between a rock and a hard place trying to basically, challenge the people's interviewing and content, and You know, how much space do you have to actually really, you know, and I've actually given this as a tip. It's like, I try to put myself as the interviewer. I flip it on its head. So I find a way
Yeah,
to
yeah.
ask the questions myself, and I don't tell them, but I put them in sort of the interview, you know, and get them to talk about their place, you know, their house, their culture, their processes, their expectations, their past experiences, what they expect, whatever. And more times than not, you know, if I end up doing a little bit less talking and them more of it, um, you know,
They
at
like you
least
better.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Well, it's a human thing, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
people like people taking an interest in them. Like you say, what I yeah, I do. I mean, I do try and um treat those things as a conversation.
Mm,
And like you're saying, I think when people are shown the person who's come in to be interviewed takes an interest in it, and that's a real skill, isn't it? A real
mm,
skill of leadership and like leadership at all levels. It doesn't have to be a boss, but people hire people, and
mm,
if you're a person who takes an interest in the other people, then you're probably going to be able to build social capital,
mhm,
and you're probably going to be able to become fairly quickly influential within the organization. And like you say, Sanjay, it's mostly by listening, isn't it? Really. So like you say, I think that's a real skill, and that's one to, that I think we should all encourage people if they're listening to this or watching this, and they've got interviews. I think that's something that they should consider is going in there with not a bunch of questions at the end when you get asked, have you got
mhm,
any questions? But just sort of teeing up throughout the conversation, and remembering to go, well, I might say this about what you just asked me, but what do you, I mean, what do you, and just like batting it back and having a bit of to and fro.
mhm.
Um, because people do like to talk about themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
It's incredibly flattering, isn't it?
And as you progress, you know, let's say, you know, we start off with a gig, you know, next week, you know, within the first month to 3 months, you're actually interviewing people and getting to know them, and they're interviewing
Yeah,
you because it's your
yeah.
first, you know, sort of
Set of
interaction with them
interactions.
or
Yeah,
second, right? And
yeah,
so every interaction you're having and building off of to sort of create your contextual mapping of where it is you are and how you want to move. Those are all sort of mini interviews, right? And
yeah,
so, you know, people ask you, oh, you go bike riding? Oh wow, where's that? How long you been doing that? You know, and then um, you know, so I think just developing that there's just a lot at stake when you're doing the interview, which is to get you in the front door. And so
yeah.
that tends to, I think, bring out a lot of angst and I think nervousness. Sometimes I think even the interviewers are nervous, and I've seen that, you know. So
What other tips do you have then? If people are going to go to an interview to sort of calm them down and not worry about that, not worry about that contrived situation and the pressure. Is there anything else you sort of tell yourself to get you in that zone?
For,
well, obviously preparation always helps, but I try not. It's just like kind of like an exam. Like, you know, you trust who you are, be
Yeah,
authentic, prepare, right? Know about the company, show curiosity where you see there are gaps. I think Dan mentioned, you know, in one of his last interviews that, you know, he tried to really show a true understanding of what it is that they do. And so don't be ashamed of asking when you're not sure about something. You know what I mean? I think that naturally is always going to develop a conversation, um, you know, or should at least. And if it doesn't, then that's okay. But I think preparation and just being comfortable with who you are yourself and whatever questions that arise from that, you know, that's the best way to walk into the doors, just by being yourself, I think, you know. So
mm,
and I think you can take comfort in if it doesn't work out, you wouldn't have
mhm.
been happy there. However, I understand that's easy to say when you have, savings or money or you have some way to
yeah,
subsist. while you're looking. If you're desperately in need of work to pay the bills, it's a little harder to reconcile that.
Mm.
And so maybe it's sort of like dating. People say that, you meet the right person when you're not looking, is what a lot of people will say.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's sort of, yeah, it's kind of like that is, you don't want to put on a sham of who you are,
Mm.
and have them hire this person that you're not,
Yeah.
because that's just going to create tension down the line. So you might temporarily solve the problem and have some income, but it's not going to work because you're not being the person that they're going to get. So I
Mm.
think you have to be yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, if you care about longevity, and yeah, if you need something, I mean, maybe there's things you need to hide. I don't know.
I think people stress themselves out about, I think people imagine going into those situations and like they may be casting the net wide and they may be going for things that they don't know whether they're suitable for, or because people we talk ourselves out of things, don't we, before we,
Mm.
and usually I reckon we talk ourselves out of things based on the fact that we might really want something, but we're talking ourselves out of it already, so that when we hear the word no, we're
Or
we're all right with it. We've
mentally prepared.
reconciled
Yeah.
ourselds. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because we don't
Yeah.
rejection's a tough thing, and that's a tough thing about going for jobs. I mean, one of the things that I've often said to myself and to other people who are asking me about doing that sort of thing is, and I think it's probably sort of a weird thing, but I said you only have to say yes right at the end. That's the last time when if they offer you the job, that's the only time you have to make the leap. And it's sort of like that might sound weird. So that there's an expectation there that they're going to,
Mm-hmm.
but also like I think just sort of reminding yourself of that, you are sort of saying to yourself, actually these are just conversations. They may well not come back to me. So actually I won't have to do anything. I don't have to
Mm.
commit to anything.
Yeah.
It's if they keep coming back to me, and then while you're learning about them by having these interactions, if it's one of these 6 interview things, or it's like 3 interviews or whatever, you're learning about them, they're learning about you, they keep inviting you back. And it's only right at the end where, because I think sometimes as well, when if sometimes people can be in situations where, they do make it through and they do get an offer. Um, and then I think because they've spent so much time in this, is like a lot of things we talk about in business, isn't it? It's like sunken cost fallacy. Or spent a lot of time. I couldn't possibly say no now.
Yeah.
Well, you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
You can if you've learned about this set of people and you think like this isn't really for me, whatever. You
Mm.
can. And I think hopefully, I think when I sort of use that, it also helps me just to bring it back down to these are just conversations between humans. There's no just because I'm having it, I'm not obliged to do anything beyond it. And I think
Yeah.
that it helps me calm down, I think.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. There's
Yeah. I
that
think
big
it.
counterfactual thing, isn't there, as well, that you come away from it and through your head is like, I could have done this, that, and the other. But I think one of the other things is that I sort of say to people is like, you can't imagine what's going on in their heads. If you're
Exactly.
not successful, it
Yeah.
won't be because of the reason you thought it was.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 other things that you cannot see and cannot comprehend that might be
Great.
the reason,
Great point.
you know.
But yeah, it's again, I think there's so much, it can be such a painstaking process, and oftentimes, obviously because it's something that's tied to economics and also status as well. There's a lot riding on it oftentimes, and yeah, the decision you might make or the question you might ask in interview one may not be the same comfort level in interview by the time you get to the sixth, because it's gone on for a month, and and if
Yeah.
the stakes are a little higher or not, but yeah, it's yeah, again, it's one of those things. I think the more you do it, and it's funny again, like the contrast, cultural contrast, as far as at least I felt, um from Anglo-Saxon culture versus, versus Latin maybe culture who, you know, tend to ease in a little bit more into the conversation and before
Yeah.
they get to the nitty-gritty. Um, and even, going back to on the African continent is, I haven't really had a chance to interview out there before. Because all my adult life has been, in other parts of the world, but it's just the same type of pressure, and people have the same sort of battle of, being their authentic selves, and appearing to be who this person who's interviewing me wants me to appear as. So, but yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
those are great tips.
But I think, I went out and I talked at Menlo Innovations and gave my talk, the no one is an asshole rule talk. And I got to see their extreme interviews in practice.
Mm,
And for those who haven't read the book, essentially, it's like a group of 30 to 40, maybe 50 people that come in to interview, and they get paired up because at Menlo Innovations, they work in pairs. And so
Yeah.
they give them problems, but before they actually sit down, like Rich Sheridan, the CEO, the guy who wrote the books, sits
Yeah.
at the front of this big group and he's like, hey, we want you all to be successful. So I'm going to tell you up front what we're watching for. We're watching for kindergarten skills. And he says, as an example, we pair and we give you a pencil, and you're gonna have a pencil to write your answers with. And invariably, even though I'm telling you this right now, one of you throughout the day is going to, without asking, without saying anything, you are going to grab the pencil from your partner and start writing. That is something that we watch for. We are looking, we don't want those sorts of people. Someone that does that is not someone that we want to work for us. So we're looking for this. And he says, I'm telling you this now, and someone is going to do it. He says, but we're looking for good kindergarten skills. And so that's why when I find, like, Matt, this sequel test, or there's hopefully this airs, well, we'll make sure that it airs after my interview process is done. I'm interviewing at a place where they want me to do a case study. And I'm kind of like, really, you want me to do a case study, and that, like, you're going to judge me based on, like, why not judge me based on how I came about it and how I interacted with people to get to it, as opposed to like what the answer was? Because isn't that more important? Like, isn't that more important than what the answer was?
yeah,
But no,
yeah,
I'll do it because they want me to do it. That's great. But we spend so much time trying to figure out, does this person have the technical competence,
yeah,
that we don't actually evaluate. People say, oh, we hire for culture, or some people say, oh, don't hire for culture. I think you need to hire for, does this person interact in the workplace the way that is going to make them successful at this company?
mm,
It's probably the
Yeah. Yeah.
biggest, if I
Yeah.
had to guess, the biggest indicator of success, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. The case study thing, though, I mean, I sort of, any sort of device or tool can be used nicely or wrongly, can't it? I suppose. I mean, I have a couple, but I sort of think, like, if you come at that benevolently, I think it's quite nice to have a couple um, that I can draw upon, and they're some of the places that I had the most success at, and I've been successful at other places, but I haven't enjoyed myself, so I haven't written them up. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to. Why would I want to relive that?
mm,
Um, and and I think I've always had some form of success because I've learned throughout it. Like, if someone else could objectively say, "Well, that didn't set the world on fire, Matt. That experience you had there," and it's like, yeah, and so I'm not going to write that one up either. But I've learned. I will have definitely have learned from it, so I could write it up and I could put that spin on it.
yeah,
But the two that I've done, um, you know, I've in the and what one of them's on my LinkedIn thing, the Waters Corporation thing. So it's me and my pal Kieran took that to conference and did a talk about it. That's one of my cases. The others, I've worked at local governments, and those were case studies. And I think both of those things, there was a lot of success in them, and I've written those up. But in both of those things, what the local authority one I did because I needed to do when I became a Kanban trainer, you needed to do a sort of a lightning talk, quick fire case study. So they could
Mm.
see that when you went into a classroom with a set of students, you weren't just using the Kanban University case studies, you were using your own experience and all that sort of stuff. So I did the local authority one then. But all of them, like you're saying, like I do think sometimes when you're going into an interview and they do want an answer, actually they want some free consultation. And that does worry me, that sort of thing. But like the case studies that I've got that I would share with people, there was a lot of failure in there as well. There was a lot of we didn't solve all the problems. And also like both of those situations, like even the most recent ones a few years ago now, and they've had successes, and they've also, entropy exists in all systems. They've decayed back because they've not continued to put energy into it and focus on it. So
Yeah.
it's just like those case study things. If you bring them along, I do sort of feel like it. I do wonder whether it's like, are you looking for some free consultancy?
Mm.
Because actually, it's contextless, isn't it? It's like so this thing that I did over here might not work where you are, but my job is to come in and try and see what would work. I suppose
Yeah.
evidence of
Yeah.
having done that in some places might be
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
good, but
Yeah.
you do wonder how people are going to use that.
Mm. There's also cases where, you guys talk about case study. The case study has to fit in the time box of the interview. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes you may have an inclination to go, into enough detail to ensure that enough context is understood to which yielded the learnings you that came about. And other times you're conflicting with the set plan the interviewer has. Sometimes they come in with an actual
Yeah.
plan of questions, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah,
always is tricky because they're so sort of uh, uh, prescribing to that plan
yeah,
that they'll cut you off when you're saying something maybe really valuable that may be of real interest to them. But
yeah,
they'll shoehorn and
Yeah.
cut that off just to get to ensure that they're going to the last 5 questions which they haven't gotten to. So
Sure.
yeah, it's the stylistic approach of the interviewer obviously gives you, and there's tips and ways to find out really quickly whether they're on a set plan or they're taking a plan A approach, to where
yeah.
you have a little
Mm.
bit more wiggle room. So, but
Yeah.
That
Well,
Menlo
I
pencil,
want to make
Dan.
sure we're,
I
what's
was just
that?
going to ask you about that Menlo pencil. Has anyone ever snapped the
Yeah.
pencil in half? Because I
I don't
I
know.
just
Well,
snapped the pencil in half.
one of the things that they do tell you, this is part of the rules. Rich says, and this isn't a game and ingenuity and like, oh, I have a second pencil. He says when we pair so that one person has the keyboard and the
Oh, okay.
other person is right. We do pairing. It isn't about do you have two pencils or can you find another pencil? It's
Oh,
about how do you share and how do you hand off and how do you do that interaction, right?
fair enough.
yeah,
And so
I saw.
they very explicitly explain, that's what we're looking for. And
Yeah,
it feels like what you get so much in interviews is I have something I'm looking for, but I'm not going to tell you what that is. And I'm going to ask you some
yeah,
questions blindly, and
yeah,
I'm going to see if I can screw you up so that you take yourself out of the running. It would be so much. Imagine if someone's like, hey, look, this is my biggest pain point right now. So when you give me your answers, I would really like to understand. I'm asking questions to understand how you would help solve that pain point. So when you answer the questions, can you phrase them in a way? And I've gone all blurry for those of you who are watching. So that would be really, I think that would be a way more interesting interview because you would get a bunch of people, and then you could say,
yeah,
well, that person doesn't know how to, that person clearly doesn't understand how to speak to solving my problem in these answers. So
Yeah,
that's actually a problem, as
yeah,
opposed
yeah,
to that person somehow pulled out of thin air these answers that most closely aligned with what I was expecting. And therefore that also inserts all sorts of bias. I mean, not that you can squeeze bias entirely out of,
out
I
of
get we all
anything.
come with
Yeah,
our, but like, it's just like, oh, well, this person sounds most like the answers I would have given. Therefore,
yeah,
this
yeah,
person is the person yeah.
for
yeah, yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is a massive, seems like a massive modern day interviewing anti-pattern, doesn't it? Like, I've got a bunch of secrets. I want to see if you can guess them. Instead of
Yeah.
let's share our knowledge and see if
yeah,
you can come and solve a load of my problems,
yeah,
which is what
Yeah.
really that's what they need, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna if you can guess what's on my page, you pass and I'll let you in.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like,
Which is
yeah.
funny because it's kind of like you're queuing up groupthink. All right, you're trying to see who thinks like you and which is, complete antithesis to the diversity you want and collective intelligence and all these different things. And so it's really interesting. Yeah.
And when you look at Menlo Innovations, right, their culture is very special. And I don't think that you can necessarily pick your culture. I think that's hard to do. But you can pick your practices and you can pick how you do things, and the outcome of all those things does get a culture. But I think that they're able to maintain the specialness that makes them Menlonians, because they have some rituals that help maintain continuity, and they're very open, and like just their whole process is different. They don't approach it like who brings in 30 people for 2 open positions and says, hey, you're all competing with each other. And by the way, we expect, even though you're competing with each other for these 2 jobs, we're watching to see how you interact with one another and how you help your partner be successful. Because here at Menlo, when we do paired programming, you need to be, might be competing for recognition with this person, but you need to make sure that that person is successful, because that's how we are successful as a group. And it's really interesting. And the fact that they're like, we want to make sure that you know the rules, and that and they externalize, they actually say the words, we are here to give you all this stuff to make you be successful. We are trying our best. We are giving you everything up front and giving you these instructions. And it's just amazing to me, because they spend about as much time with instructions as they do with the observation. Name an interview where that happens. It's just it's mind blowing.
I'd like to experience that.
I'd like to too. Sounds like a live reality TV show. It sounds like a lot of fun.
God, it's amazing. If you ever can make it out to Ann Arbor, Michigan, it is it is the most amazing experience to watch that. It's that, I'll let everybody in on a secret. I don't know if I'm supposed to. I thought this was funny. They everyone takes a pool, like there's a pool for the day, a bet on who's going to be the earliest. Like what time of day is the earliest person going to show up for the interview? Because they're supposed to come at like 3:00.
Oh wow!
And so somebody will pick like 2:35, and people will pick to the minute times, and they have like a bet of when the earliest person shows up. That's awesome. Which I think is interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I'm always an early bird. Mostly, I think I am, because I'm always just excited to do the thing.
Can't wait to
get it. I want to impress anyone. It's just that, I've got something I've got to go to.
I'm both that, and I'm like, you know what? I want to make, they've set up this time, if I'm looking, I may not be working. And so I want to make sure that I have, that I'm there and not wasting their time, and that I'm there on time. So I would rather waste 15 or 30 minutes of my of my day sitting there and checking my phone or whatever, so that I'm there on time. But when I do that, I have no expectations that anyone's going to entertain me for 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm here, but I'm going to sit quietly. And when you're ready, like, don't rush. When you're ready, you're ready. I just wanted to be here on time.
Yeah. It's always a good sign. Never hurts, for sure. Never hurts.
Well, I think we're kind of winding down, and what I'm gathering from the emotion of the room.
Yeah, that was I think the approach really kind of brought the dynamic we kind of expected. That was
do we think that beginning bit?
Yeah,
that's cool. We should do that again. We'll try that again.
Yeah, definitely.
I think good luck to anyone having seen this whenever we put it out there. Good luck to anyone who's gonna have an interview this week.
Don't break the pencil.
Beat yourself up and stay calm.
Don't go nuclear, and don't break the pencil.
Have good kindergarten skills.
Don't break the pencil.
All right.
Follow the rules. Brilliant. Cheers, fellas.
Ciao.
Thanks for joining us today on Flâneurs, available wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you heard, You know what to do.